Okay. Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here with such a distinguished representation of the House Democratic Caucus, leadership from committees of jurisdiction that have questions about the actions of the Trump administration as related to the rule of the law. Congresswoman, ranking member, top Democrat Maxine Waters, Congressman Pascrell, Congressman Castro, Congresswoman Jayapal, Congressman Cicilline, Congresswoman Watson Coleman, and Representative Hank Johnson. They are here to speak from the standpoint of their committees. I'm not going to characterize their remarks except to say I'm very proud of the work that they have done. Earlier this week, we saw cold, hard evidence that the Trump administration and the Trump family have eagerly intended to collude with Russia, a hostile foreign policy to influence an American election. Today, we learned a former Russian counterintelligence agent was also present at the Trump meeting. Members of Congress take a sacred oath. I do solemnly swear, and that to uphold the Constitution of the United States is what our responsibility is. The President also takes that oath. Speaker Ryan has avoided any response by the Republicans, any positive action to uphold the Constitution of the United States in terms of our electoral system, our democracy. Earlier this week, I called upon him to give us a vote on an independent commission, outside independent commission to investigate the ties to Russia. What do the Russians have politically, financially, and any personally on Donald Trump that he fawns over Putin, questions sanctions, is reckless when it comes to Article 5 of NATO. The list goes on and on. The American people have a right to know. Maybe they'll clear the air. Maybe it will be exculpatory. Maybe it won't. But we know one thing for sure. We have a responsibility and an oath of office to make sure that Russia does not meddle in our elections again. And that would be the purpose of such an investigation. I mentioned calling upon the Speaker to give us a vote on an independent commission. I also called for the revoking of the security clearance for Jared Kushner. It's absolutely ridiculous that he should have that clearance. It's not justified in any way. The President could revoke it in a moment, and he should. But Congress should call upon, Republicans in Congress should stop hiding from the truth and stop hiding the truth from the American people. I think in light of the actions this week, the emails that we saw related to Donald Trump Jr.'s meeting with the Russians, now we know a counterintelligence person in the meeting as well, that it is important that we see all electronic communication, whether it's direct messaging, Twitter, email, text, whatever it happens to be, among the members of the Trump family and within the Trump administration. Did he convey that message, that the spirit of that message to the President? The American people have a right to know. And so here we are. House Democrats are not going to let the Republicans off the hook for their complicity in this. Today, we are announcing a new coordinated effort to force votes to get answers for the American people. We will force Republicans to take votes on the record to continue from hiding the facts from the American people. We will expose House Republicans in action for their willful, shameful enabling. They have become enablers of the violation of our Constitution, the attack on the integrity of our elections, the security of our country. The integrity of our democracy is at stake. House Republicans will have to answer for their actions, and one of the questions they will some of the questions they will have to answer will be posed by our colleagues. I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished top Democrat on the Financial Services Committee, Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California.
Thank you. Thank you, Leader Pelosi, for organizing all of us today who have taken some action in dealing with the Trump family criminal enterprise. Whether we have written letters or introduce legislation. So many of us are attempting in every way that we possibly can to unveil the criminal activity, the unconstitutional activity of this president and his family. So I have dubbed them the criminal clan a long time ago. And as many of you know, I stepped out a long time ago and said I thought he should be impeached. But let me share with you today one of the actions that I'm taking. Donald Trump is clearly hiding something when it comes to his finances. There are many unanswered questions. Why does Trump refuse to reveal his tax returns to the public? Why was Deutsche Bank, a bank that has been fined for Russian money laundering and many other violations of the law, willing to lend hundreds of millions of dollars to Trump after his bankruptcies when no other bank would lend to him? Why, according to press reports, have around 70% of Trump's real estate property sales over the past 12 months been to secretive shell companies? Democrats on the Financial Services Committee want to get to the bottom of these questions and follow the Trump money trail. Unfortunately, our request to Chairman J.L. Hensarling that he utilize the investigative powers of the committee to look into matters pertaining to Donald Trump and his financial dealings have been completely ignored. Mind you, this is not a chairman who is shy about using the oversight powers of the committee, but rather than use these powers appropriately, he abuses them by harassing the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Simply put, the chairman is covering for the president and elevating party over country. Our request to the Treasury Department for documents on Trump and his financial dealings was also ignored. To that end, I and other Democrats on the committee have introduced a resolution of inquiry. This resolution directs the Treasury Secretary to provide any documents pertaining to credit extended by or involving Russian banks or Russian government officials to the president, his immediate family, his associates, as well as his properties and businesses, any money laundering violations involving the president, his immediate family, his associates, his properties and businesses, any violations of U.S. sanctions, the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, or the Logan Act by President Trump, his immediate family members, or his associates, and other information related to Deutsche Bank and the president. Our Republican colleagues must wake up and hold this president accountable. Thank you very much. And with that, the next speaker is Bill Pascrell, a member of the Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you very much, Maxine. Good morning, everyone. On February the 1st, I wrote a letter to the chairman of the committee which I participate in, and that is the Ways and Means Committee Chairman Kevin Brady. In that letter, I asked him to use his existing authority to obtain President Trump's tax returns for review by our committee. And I would say from the get-go here that a lot of the questions that are being asked today and have been asked in the past could have been avoided if the President of the United States have followed the Ethics Commission and to divest himself of all of his holdings and assets. The President chose not to do that. And the more we get into 2017, the more we understand how the tax returns are critical. He could have avoided all of this by divesting himself. But the deals that have been made just during the time that he's been the president is a reflection. Every president, and this has nothing to do with party affiliation, which I said to Kevin Brady, in February of this year. Every president must have a clean slate when he goes into that office and raises his hand to be sworn so that he could be objective in his decisions. We have no assurances of that right now, and we are not going to simply sit back and reflect on the good of his word. I'm not. I don't think many Americans are. And members of Congress, specifically the tax writing committees, currently have authority in the tax code to get the president's tax returns to examine his conflicts of interest. We not only have the ability to do so, we have the duty to the American people. This is especially true given that the president has refused to divest himself. So since I wrote that letter in February, we've seen a steady stream of very, very worrying information and a growing cloud of smoke around this administration. And the response has been, you know, there's nothing there. Well, if you do remember, the Watergate situation took 26 months. We're just in the infancy of this investigation, be it by committee, be it by the FBI, be it by Mr. Mueller. We're just in the infancy. Why were Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort so willing and eager to meet with Russian government operatives during the campaign? And by the way, now we're thinking and considering that there may have been other meetings. We didn't know about this one. And then that this was discovered. This is a drop-by-drop situation. Donald Trump may love getting help from the Russians, but the Congress of the United States does not love it, and we will not stand for it. The Trump family's personal and financial conflicts while holding office have been flagrant and on full display. Whether it's a Saudi Arabia paying the Trump Hotel $270,000, or more than $15,000 of U.S. taxpayer dollars being spent at a Canadian Trump hotel, or the granting of trademarks in China, which is scandalous, the myriad of conflicts are out in the open for everyone to see. And that's how government should be. Since February, we've held 9 votes on the floor of the House of Representatives. And in March 1st, I offered a resolution of inquiry that was debated in the Ways and Means Committee. At each turn, the Republicans in Congress blocked our efforts. Why are they hiding and being complicit, to use the leader's word, in keeping Trump's conflict secret and hidden? Why? Why is that? Why won't Republican members of Congress use their authority in the law to provide oversight and make sure the president and his family are not hiding financial ties that could cause conflicts in the decision-making? We have no way of knowing whether Mr. Trump or his firms have received Russian income or loans or entered into Russian-linked partnerships. We have a right to know that. The legislative branch has the responsibility and the authority to check the executive branch under Section 6103 of the tax code, which allows for an examination of his returns. The authority put in place specifically so Congress could examine conflicts of interest in the executive following that great scandal in the early 1920s. Today, I'll be introducing a new resolution of inquiry to give the Ways and Means Committee another chance to get it. And by the way, in conclusion, it's not enough for Republican congressmen to go to town meetings and say, yes, the president should give us his tax returns, and then not come back to Washington and not have the courage to stand up for their convictions and say, this is the direction we should be going. And that's not good enough. So there's been over 20 people on the other side that have said he should release his tax returns, but will not vote to do it. Congress can and must use its authority to address President Trump's tax returns and give the American people the transparency they deserve. And now I'd like to introduce a great congressman from the state of Texas, from the town of San Antonio, Representative Castro.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. Good morning. Thank you, Democratic Leader Pelosi, for all of your work to hold the Trump administration accountable on behalf of the American people and get to the bottom of Russia's interference in our 2016 election. I'm here on behalf of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, and I also want to thank Congressman Engel, our ranking member, for his leadership on this issue as well. The resolution of inquiry we'll be introducing in our committee requests the President and directs the Secretary of State to provide Congress with copies of any documents, records, or communications that were produced on or after July 21st, 2016 that relate to modifying, suspending, waiving, revoking, or terminating sanctions on Russia. If during the campaign or since the President's inauguration, members of the Trump team have considered altering sanctions on our adversary Russia, Congress and the American people need to know and have a right to know. Democrats on the Foreign Affairs Committee have repeatedly expressed concern about the Trump administration's friendliness towards Russia, specifically when it comes to the issue of sanctions. The United States should be putting more sanctions on Russia, not considering letting up the pressure. Earlier this week, Ranking Member Engel joined Democratic Leader Pelosi and Whip Hoyer in introducing the House version of the Senate's Russia-Iran sanctions bill. There are no longer any procedural constraints preventing a vote on these sanctions. The only thing stalling this bill are Speaker Ryan and President Trump. House Republicans shouldn't be providing cover for the administration and its affection for Russia. Speaker Ryan should allow the House to vote on the Senate sanctions bill, and Republicans should join Democrats in voting for this resolutions of inquiry that will provide Congress and Americans with important information about the administration's dealings with Russia, especially in the wake of the troubling news that broke this week regarding the Trump campaign's communications with Russia. All relevant facts must come to light. The United States suffered a catastrophic event in 2016 when a foreign adversary tried to interfere with our elections. And to do nothing, as the President has done, as this Republican Congress has done, is to invite Russia to interfere again in 2018, 2020, and beyond. It's also to invite others, perhaps the Chinese, perhaps non-state actors, to interfere with our democratic processes. That's simply unacceptable for the nation. Now I'd like to introduce a wonderful Congresswoman from Washington State, Seattle, I believe, from the Judiciary Committee, Congresswoman Jayapal.
Thank you so much, Congressman Castro, and thank you, Leader Pelosi, for your leadership. I'm very proud to introduce this resolution of inquiry with my colleague from Rhode Island, Mr. Cicilline. For 6 months, we have watched the Trump administration make a mockery out of our laws and the highest office of our land, while our Republican colleagues on the Judiciary Committee refuse to allow hearings on obstruction of justice and collusion with Russia. Attorney General Sessions has engaged in a conduct of duck and cover that fits a pattern that we've seen with the Trump administration. The Attorney General failed to disclose his meetings with the Russian government in testimony before Congress, and just yesterday, the Department of Justice released a heavily redacted document that suggests that the Attorney General failed to disclose any contacts with foreign governments on his security clearance application. This is the form he submitted. It's blank here, calling into question whether the nation's top law enforcement office should even have a security clearance. Our resolution of inquiry on the Judiciary Committee forces the House Committee on the Judiciary to take up the systematic problems on this administration's conflicts of interest and collusion with Russia. It is appalling, frankly, that the House Judiciary Committee has abdicated its duty to hold the Trump administration accountable and refused to even consider asking for answers on the Trump's ties to Russia. The House Judiciary Committee should follow the example of Republican leaders on the Senate Judiciary Committee who are taking action on the Trump-Russia matter. They know how essential it is to the core principles of our democracy, and the Senate Judiciary Committee is holding some hearings, has requested some information. So just as our Senate counterparts are now going to exercise oversight over Donald Trump Jr.'s meetings with the Russian government, Mr. Cicilline and I will be amending our resolution and will be sending a letter to Chairman Goodlatte to demand more information on Donald Trump Jr.'s affairs. Our committee must do its job, not only on Donald Trump Jr., but also on Jared Kushner's participation in this meeting and the abrupt settlement by the Department of Justice for a related money laundering case involving $230 million that was settled for less than $6 million. That is millions of dollars that the American taxpayers have been denied and have had taken away from them. We have a duty as the Judiciary Committee to exercise oversight over the administration and the Justice Department. The American people deserve better. This resolution that we are introducing ensures that our committee starts actually being a Judiciary Committee, exercising oversight over this matter that is so critical for the preservation of our democracy. And now it's a great honor to introduce the excellent leader, Congressman David Cicilline from Rhode Island.
Thank you very much. I first want to say thank you to Leader Pelosi and all of my colleagues who have made the ongoing effort to hold this administration accountable, and I'm very proud to be with them today. I want to thank Congresswoman Jayapal for her leadership on this resolution. I'm proud to join with her in presenting it to the Judiciary Committee. There is no more sacred responsibility that we have than to protect the integrity of our democracy. And we have the privilege and the honor of serving in the Congress of the United States. And in that role, we are guardians of this democracy. And what we have seen, sadly, from our colleagues on the other side of the aisle is that the Republicans are really asleep at the wheel. We're here today pressing these resolutions of inquiry because every day, it seems, we learn more and more about the Trump campaign's relationship with Russian officials and what appears to be an ongoing effort to obstruct justice and prevent the American people from learning the truth. This is unlike anything we've seen in modern political times. In the last few days alone have brought alarming revelations about the president's son, his son-in-law, his campaign manager, his attorney general, and now another person who was previously affiliated with the Russian intelligence services. And the list goes on, as our leader has said. We've known for a while that Speaker Ryan and the House Republicans don't want to work with us on the critical issues facing working families in our country. They don't want to work with us on jobs, on tax fairness, on infrastructure, on workforce training, on health care, or making college affordable, making home ownership more sustainable, or retirement more secure. But what's most outrageous is that now, after 6 months of Republican rule, we know that they don't even want to work with us to make sure the American people know the truth about Russian interference in our elections. And they don't want to work with us to make sure that it never happens again. There is, as I said, no more serious responsibility than we have than protecting our democracy. And the American people deserve members of Congress who take this responsibility seriously. And so that's why our resolution will force the production of evidence relevant to some of the most egregious actions that the Trump administration has taken to date. As members of the Judiciary Committee, we want to know, and our constituents want to know, and they're really demanding to know, what is the full extent of the ties between Donald Trump's inner circle and the Kremlin? Was James Comey fired to hide the truth about Donald Trump's ties to Russia or collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian officials? Did Jeff Sessions violate his recusal when he participated in the firing of James Comey? And there are many other additional questions which our resolution will attempt to answer. It's our intention to bring this before our committee and demand that these facts be presented so that we can understand exactly what has happened in our country. And as I said, make sure that it never happens again. We've really crossed into unprecedented territory. And I fear that we are witnessing a betrayal of our nation that is unlike anything we've ever seen before in American politics. And we have a responsibility to uncover the truth and to lay the facts bare for all to see and judge for themselves, and our resolution will help us do that. And now I have the great pleasure of introducing my friend and colleague, the distinguished gentlelady from New Jersey, Bonnie Watson-Coleman, who serves on the Homeland Security and Oversight Committee.
Thank you. Thank you, David.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Leader Pelosi for being so vigilant in ensuring that we are holding this president accountable and reminding our Republican colleagues of their responsibility and for what people had elected them to do. Each day, American taxpayers ask this administration for a balanced budget, for good-paying jobs and living wages and affordable health care, but instead they're given lip service as the president and his adult children enrich themselves at America's expense. The tax dollars that Americans want to see rebuilding our nation's infrastructure, investing in education of our children, and ensuring senior citizens receive adequate return on their investment in our workforce is instead being wasted further by furthering the business interests of the Trump Organization. My resolution would call on the Department of Homeland Security to provide the Committee on Homeland Security with all the information and documents that it possesses related to payments made by the agency for the Trump Organization or Trump family member travel in furtherance of Trump Organization businesses. Congress has a constitutional obligation to investigate and to ensure that the Department of Homeland Security resources are solely used to ensure the protection of those seeking to prioritize and advocate for the interests of the United States of America. Each of us standing here is asking House Republicans to take a stand. These resolutions are simply a request for paperwork. A request to let the American people know that they are the priority and partisanship will not stand in the way of their protection. I've even offered an amendment in the committee to ensure that conflicts of interest like this one do not happen, and it was defeated. These votes are indicative of their loyalties to this president instead of the men and the women who elected them to serve. The Committee on Homeland Security has a duty to shield the homeland and protect Americans, which is why I urge my colleagues to investigate these expenses to ensure that our United States resources are targeted toward true security needs and not lining the pockets of the president. Approving this resolution would be the first step towards providing answers to the American people and preventing further misuse of the tax dollars to line the pocketbook of a president who has made it clear that this nation's best interest is not his priority. And with that, I yield to Representative Johnson from Georgia, ranking member on Transportation and Infrastructure.
Thank you, and I want to thank the the leader, Nancy Pelosi, for convening us here today and for leading our caucus during these very difficult times that we're in, when up is down and down is up for some people. But the truth, ladies and gentlemen, will set you free. When Donald Trump took office on January 20th, he rendered himself at that time in violation of a lease that he had with the citizens of the United States of America for the renovation and management of the old post office here in Washington, D.C. And the reason why is that there's a clause in that lease that says that it shall not be a public official of the United States of America, an elected official, cannot share any benefits under that lease. And that lease agreement clause is in keeping with the emoluments clause of our Constitution. And Donald Trump, being an elected official of the United States of America when he took office, rendered himself in violation of that lease. And since that time, members of the House Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure have sent a total of 5 letters to the General Services Administration requesting critical information related to the apparent breach of the terms of the old post office lease with the Trump Organization and the potential conflicts of interest raised by President Trump's role as both landlord and tenant at the old post office building. The agency has either ignored or sent inadequate responses to each of those letters. The Trump Old Post Office LLC is a corporation completely owned and controlled by President Trump and his 3 oldest children who have very minor interests. The lease agreement explicitly prohibits any elected official of the U.S. government from serving as a lessee or from obtaining any benefit that may arise from the lease. Specifically, the lease states, quote, "No member or delegate to Congress or elected official of the government of the United States or the government of the District of Columbia shall be admitted to any share or part of this lease or to any benefit that may arise therefrom." The last time I checked, the President of the United States is indeed an elected official, and this one's under investigation. Ranking members DeFazio and I introduced a resolution of inquiry to force GSA to produce the following documentation. 1, all guidance or direction to the acting administrator or other GSA staff regarding responses to requests for information from members of Congress and ranking members of committees. 2, all documents associated with the old post office lease agreement between the government and the Trump Organization, including annual statements, budgets, and mortgages. 3, all legal memorandum opinions regarding the old post office lease agreement. We need to assure the taxpayers that President Trump is not enriching himself while serving in the ultimate position of public trust. As ranking member of this subcommittee, I consider this to be my top priority, and I urge my Republican colleagues to stop protecting the financial interests of Donald Trump and start following the law and the Constitution and resolve this issue for the benefit of the American people. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thank my colleagues for their very thoughtful work on this subject to get the facts involved here. We have also been joined by our colleague, the most senior freshman. He was sworn in the day after just shortly right after the election, before January, from Philadelphia. We began our conversation about the Constitution of the United States, which was written there, values of our country, and it said we will support and defend the Constitution. So in terms of our values, in terms of our founders, in terms of the defense of our Constitution and our country, I'm pleased to yield to the distinguished gentleman, most senior freshman Dwight Evans of Philadelphia, of Pennsylvania. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you, Leader, for the introduction. The Leader is correct. In Article 1, Section 1, it talks about the power being inherited in the Congress and that we have a responsibility and an obligation to the people of this nation. Secondly, also the issue around national security. As you have heard from all of my colleagues, they have talked about the importance of the transparency and that we have a message to the people about accountability. That is something that we do not take lightly, and it is something that we all recognize that we need to raise the consciousness to the people about the need to have transparency and openness. So I thank the Leader and all my colleagues here who are ranking members and senior members for their leadership collectively. This should not just be a Democratic issue. Republicans also should be deeply concerned. This transcends politics. This is about putting the country first. So when the Leader expressed that she did, coming from the city of Philadelphia with the Constitution of the United States, that's what they did. They put the country first. And again, we're ready. And thank you very much, Leader.
I'm sure that our colleagues will be pleased to take any questions you may have. I just want to lead off this section this way. We talked about this earlier. When the president was a candidate for president, he said, I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and nobody would really do anything much about it because he was held in such high regard by himself, for sure. And that is the attitude that he and his family have brought to the White House, an arrogance about being above the law, that they are not accountable. And that is why I thank the work of the committees with these inquiries that they have made to get to the facts. This weekend, or today actually, our colleague Benny Thompson of Mississippi will be doing the response to the president, talking about the integrity of our elections. He's our top Democrat on the Homeland Security Committee. Imagine this. that some of the information that should be available to the states about information that has been collected in terms of an assault on the integrity of our elections, they've told some of these secretaries of state, you can't get the information because you don't have the proper clearance. Oh, no, we reserve that for Jared Kushner. Any questions? Yes, sir.
In your opening remarks and also yesterday, you cited this meeting as cold hard evidence of collusion with the Trump family campaign and the Russians. You heard from Congresswoman Waters saying that she's thought for long that President Trump should be impeached, and then you had Brad Sherman and Al Green both introduce articles of impeachment this week. Do all these inquiries that you're talking about this morning, do they need to be answered and investigated before you're ready to support impeachment, or what's it going to take for you to move forward?
Well, the Republicans, I think the facts will be self-evident. Maybe they will be exculpatory of the president. Maybe they will not. But there is evidence, clear evidence, that we need to know more, and we should not close that path. But let me just say what I did say yesterday, because I think it's really important for people to know. As my colleague, Mr. Cicilline, we've gone into new territory this week with the Trump Jr. Statement. Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, Paul Manafort, and the Trump campaign. And then we're finding out who else was in the room. This is a campaign violation, soliciting, coordinating, or accepting something of value, opposition research, documents and information from a foreign government or foreign national. Plain and simple. Criminal conspiracy to defraud the United States, impeding the lawful administration of a federal election, or to make an offense against the United States, cyber crimes, hacking against U.S. citizens, the Clinton campaign. Conspiracy with respect to espionage, depending on whether information was obtained through Russian spying and the level of their awareness of the spying. When I say there, I mean Trump, Kushner, Manafort, etc. The awareness of the spying to receive this information. So we need to follow the facts, and what did the rest of the family know, and when did they know it? So this is, you know, I've always been reluctant because I think impeachment is something that really has an impact on the country. So when the facts are clear, the law is certainly clear. When the facts are clear, then this Congress will make a decision in that regard. But I hope that the Republicans will not stand in the way of the American people getting the facts. When the president has clearly stated he can do whatever he wants, he's not accountable. Any other questions?
Leader Pelosi, are you saying that the people in that meeting violated those laws or may have violated those laws?
Yes. Let me just say this, because I hear the president saying things that are so, shall we say, groundless. He says, oh, this is just politics. This is not just politics. You know the example of Tom Downey. Tom Downey received a packet that had information that described what the Republicans, what the Bush campaign was going to do at the debates. He was the participating in the debate preparation with Vice President Al Gore at the time. The minute he received the information, opened the package, saw what it was, he gave it to the FBI. This is fruit from a forbidden tree. You don't accept that. He turned it over to the FBI. The person who sent it to him went to jail for sending an American, not a foreign government, an American, went to jail for sending it to him. So this is about the law, but it's also about a high ethical standard that you would think anyone who wanted to be president of the United States would aspire to, really strive for, but not disregard. So on the strength of what they have now, there is very serious reason to believe that these people violated the law in being receptive to that information. They should have passed it out. And this is not how politics works. Our candidates know that if they got some ill-gotten gain in terms of negative, not a clue of did you know so-and-so didn't really go to that college, I'm talking about receiving an in-kind contribution of negative research from somebody, you turn it over to the FBI. Any other colleagues want to comment on that? Yes.
Thank you. With regards to the Russia sanctions bill, you and other House Democrats have expressed support for that measure. Congressman Castro, you said there were no procedural holdups, but isn't there a blue slip issue?
No,
Isn't there
it's resolved. The blue strip issue is resolved.
with regards to House members not being allowed to bring up a resolution of disapproval should the president ease sanctions? Is that still an issue, or where does that stand?
Well, thank you very much for your question. As you know, the sanctions bill that was introduced by top Democrat on the Committee of Foreign Affairs, Eliot Engel, which Mr. Hoyer and I joined him in, it was a bill that passed the Senate 98-2. Strong bipartisan support, the Russian sanctions and Iran sanctions legislation. That came over to the House. It had a blue slip problem, more process than you probably want to know. But in that case, that was resolved. Now, the remaining issue, weeks ago, before the break, was that they, in the legislation, they are not respectful of the minority rights of the House, the Democrats in the House. But I said to the leadership, conveyed to the leadership at the time, I don't like that. I want to protect the prerogatives of the minority in the House. But weighing the equities, what was more important was passing the Russian-Iran sanctions bill. So we are on board to just proceed. They didn't bring it up. The blue slip problem has been solved, and the only issue would be the House Democrats' prerogative in this, which, as I say, is not as important as passing the bill. So that's why Mr. Engel presented the bill, to make it clear. We're not holding up this bill. We have never been holding up this bill. If anybody's holding up the bill, it's probably the White House. And that is really where you should direct your inquiry to the Republicans as to why a bill that passed in a bipartisan way, 98-2, sanctions on Russia, is being held up in the House. I thank the chairman for the ranking member for introducing the bill, and we all stand ready to support it. He could do it today, but practically by unanimous consent, but we certainly have to do it next week. Thank you all very much.